Why are Universal monster crossover movies so complex? Imagine trying to bring together a vampire, a scientist's creation, a werewolf, a mummy, and a mysterious invisible man all in one story. That's what makes these crossover movies so tricky to pull off. Universal Studios started making these films in the early 1940s. They had already created standalone movies based on classic stories and folklore. For example, Dracula was based on Bram Stoker's novel, Frankenstein's monster came from Mary Shelley's book, and the Wolf Man was rooted in European legends. Each of these characters had their own world, rules, and tone. When they decided to mix them in one film, it was like fitting puzzle pieces from different sets together. One big reason these movies are complicated is because each monster comes from a different myth or story. Dracula is a vampire from Eastern European tales, while Frankenstein's monster is a science experiment gone wrong. The Wolf Man is based on werewolf legends, and the mummy is inspired by Egyptian curses. Combining these different backgrounds into one universe takes a lot of careful work. Writers and directors had to decide how these worlds would interact and what rules each monster would follow. Another challenge is keeping each character's personality and history consistent. Some monsters appeared in many films with different traits. For example, Dracula might be charming in one movie but sinister in another. When they meet in a crossover, filmmakers need to make sure these traits stay true or make sense in the new story. This means planning the story so that each monster's past and personality fit together smoothly. Balancing screen time is also tricky. Fans want to see their favorite monsters get enough attention. In the 1940s, movies like House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula showed multiple monsters in the same film, but they often didn't interact directly. Later films like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein tried to give each monster a role in the story, which required clever writing. They had to create a plot that included Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolf Man, and others without making the story too crowded or confusing. Genre mixing adds another layer of difficulty. Some of these films blended horror with comedy, especially in the 1940s and 50s. For example, the Abbott and Costello films used humor to make the monsters more approachable. This tonal shift meant filmmakers had to find a way to keep the scary elements while adding laughs, which isn't easy. Production and marketing also play a part. These movies aim to attract big audiences by featuring many famous monsters. This meant sometimes sacrificing story depth for spectacle. They wanted to create a shared universe that fans would love, but that could lead to stories that felt rushed or not fully developed. Finally, cultural changes over the years influenced how these crossovers were made. During the 1940s and 50s, audiences' tastes shifted. The rise of science fiction and fears about atomic energy changed how monsters were portrayed. Filmmakers had to adapt their stories to stay relevant, which added to the complexity of creating these shared universe movies. So, in the end, these movies are complex because they try to unify many different horror icons, each with their own history and rules, into one story. They need to keep each character's identity intact, balance the storylines, and appeal to a broad audience, all at the same time. That's what makes Universal monster crossover movies such a fascinating challenge in horror film history.